whatever you've come to call it these last few months. So I'll give you a few minutes on that. Lost count. We've got a couple of 1 to 5, 6 to 10. Let's give you a few more seconds because I know we've got people still coming in. All right, so looks like we are lost, that people have pretty much lost count of how many you've all attended. And so essentially here's another event that we can add to the lost count number of virtual events that we've involved in. And so I wanted to bring this together, to bring this so that we're all aware of this, just so as Bola had mentioned, and I'm kind of just reiterating here about the event today, as Bola had mentioned, for those that have come in just now, everyone is on mute. And so we really want to, again, encourage everyone to use the chat area to share your experiences with everyone. You know, if I start talking about something and you have some experiences with it or you have questions about it, please use the chat, because there are other people that are engaged with us on this presentation that are experiencing the same thing, that they're also working from home or doing this remotely in most cases, and everyone can support one another in this process. And so using that chat function is going to help us through this presentation as well. And then hopefully we should have time toward the end to be able to respond to questions, and if everybody plays nice, we might be able to unmute some of you to actually hear from you. So as I mentioned, the topic today is really focused on our new reality. And so I know there have been webinars out there about, you know, do's and don'ts and how to work from home. But I wanted to focus on a few things a little different. We'll still touch on some of those, but I really wanted to focus on working virtually from home and what we've had to do to adapt to competing priorities, right? So this is all new for us, and so there may have been things that we hadn't really thought about, and then there were certainly things that were sort of just put on us, a lot of us, that changed the whole concept of just working from home. And then I wanted to talk about virtual team dynamics and what that could look like in a virtual setting of working from home. We'll talk about staying productive through self-management. So we'll look at some techniques and some tidbits on that. And then just for fun, of course, we'll talk about your workspace, what that looks like, and how you can, you know, make some changes to it, make improvements to it, and what you've done actually to make it work for you. So we'll start with adapting to competing priorities. And so hopefully you all will use your chat in there and share, you know, what does that mean for us? You know, when we came into this, all of a sudden everyone had to leave their offices, go home, and adapt to working from home. But that's not all that happened, right? So there were competing priorities that happened that came along with having to now move from working in your office to working at home. Competing priorities like your family, your significant others, your spouse, your roommates, children, who were also kind of put on the same process of go home, shelter in place, and now you have to figure out how to compete with, you know, homeschooling children, dealing with the dogs, and I don't know what's going on here. Something just changed. And dealing with the dogs and everybody else
just
in your house.
I'm handling
right?
the don't worry.
And coworkers who are doing virtual events with you, who are playing around with your
This happens.
It happens, right? And so we have to adapt, right? And so hopefully, again, you're using your chat and you're sharing what some of those competing priorities have been for you. And the important thing is that they're going to be different for each and every one of us, right? I have, for example, 2 dogs that I didn't think would be an issue, and they drive me crazy every single day. And I've had to adapt to that. I've had to do things differently in my home to accommodate them, so that I can be productive, and so that I'm able to do this presentation without interruptions, which we'll talk about shortly as well. And so some of those competing priorities, as I mentioned, are going to redefine what working from home means for every single person. And so something that's important to keep in mind is being upfront with your team and your coworkers, your supervisors, about your new realities, right? Because again, as I mentioned, what is happening to one of your coworkers may not be the same thing that you're dealing with or that they're dealing with. And so we all have to find a way to communicate what's going on, so that people aren't left in the dark. You're not left to deal with this on your own. And it brings an opportunity for you all to share, how and what you're doing to cope with some of these things. And so being flexible is going to be a huge part of that as well, right? So being flexible with not only with your team, your coworkers, your supervisors, but in reverse as well. Supervisors, bosses will need to learn to be flexible and understand that work from home is not just 100% 8 to 5. How do you deal with, family that you may have at home that now you have to cook for them, their breakfast, their lunch, their dinner, kids that are running around, kids that need homeschooling, so how do you deal with that? And how does then your work environment, your supervisor, your coworkers, how can they all support one another and yourself through that process of dealing and coping with these competing priorities? And so what does that look like for your day? And that flexibility, looking at, as I mentioned a minute ago, the days aren't always going to be in and out 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. I mean, that may be what you put in your, that might be how you write it up. But there are going to be different realities for people. And so there's flexibility that needs to happen in there. And then also, what are some of the job expectations that you're going to have while you're working from home? What does that look like? And then how do you begin to look at how do you process that? How do you manage that throughout your day? And so hopefully we're going to be able to talk about some of those through this session today. And so everything kind of boils down to, or comes to the point of, rethinking communication. We all work in our offices, or we worked wherever we worked, and we had our own ways of talking to friends at work, colleagues, peers, coworkers, supervisors, bosses, snitches, the gossip people, everything. We have these internal communications, but now that we're at home and we're by ourselves, or we're with our family, or we're pets, or whatever, we have to rethink communication. Right? What is that going to look like now? And how do I keep that going so that I'm able to somehow, some way be able to replicate what was going on? How do I keep that going? And when and how do we communicate with one another is important as well. Because again, because of competing priorities, there may be different times when we need to communicate. There may be times when we need to schedule things and have regular meetings, so that then I am able to work a schedule around those regularly scheduled meetings. I know when to put the kids down. I know when to take the dogs out. I know when to plan for my lunch, whatever, so that I'm not confusing my daily schedule too much. And how do I keep that going as well with my colleagues? When do we communicate? Do we use email? Do we use text? When do we use text messaging? When do we use email? If you're having conversations through email, sometimes, or even through text, sometimes that message that you're communicating can be lost in translation, if you will. We've had this happen where we get into email conversations, and then all of a sudden, what I had said isn't what, or how the other person interpreted it to be. Then they come back at me, and then they start talking to someone else, and it goes on and on and on. So rethinking communication, even within your team and your colleagues and your coworkers, in terms of when do we just say, okay, let's stop the email conversation and let's do a Zoom, or let's get on the phone, or let's do something different so that I can clear this up, or clarify what my message was supposed to be, or what I intended it to be. So rethinking communication is, part of being able to adapt to this new reality of working from home virtually. And in terms of rethinking communication, another piece that we want to think about is what to do if or when you're offline. And so what do I mean by when you're offline, right? So that could mean for a number of things, right? Like the picture you see here on the screen, where it could be maybe you've stepped away and decided to go have lunch, get out of the house, go have lunch, meet someone for lunch, social distancing. And so, no one realizes that you're away from your desk, you're not available on your phone, whatever the maybe, wherever the case might be. Or, as has happened to me, I'm on here in a presentation that I was on a few weeks ago, and just talking away, and didn't realize that my internet had went out. And so that was a little awkward and a little embarrassing, that I'd been talking and didn't realize my internet had gone out. And had it not been for one of my coworkers that had texted me to say, "Hey, what happened? Where are you?" I would have probably not noticed that my Wi-Fi had gone out in my house. Or when other things happen in life, right? So other things that are going on in life, like you have to take the dogs out, or something's happening with the kids and you need to deal with that, or your roommates are loud in the other room, or you just need time for yourself. What do your staff, what do your employees and staff do to deal with that? How do they address that? Because what we want to do in terms of rethinking communication is let people know up front, talk about this, be open about it. It's like, when I go offline, or when I'm not responsive, or goes an hour or 2 hours and you're not able to get in touch with me, it's okay to send me a text message. It's okay to call me on my phone, or try to contact this other person. And it's all because people are concerned. People are worried. I remember an instance where we had a coworker of mine who didn't show up, wasn't available, couldn't be in contact, several phone calls, several text messages, nonstop for hours. And it was a lesson learned for me, was that we really didn't have anything in place to know what was okay. Like, was it okay to contact someone else, like an emergency contact for that person? Was it okay to reach out to this coworker's family, their sister? And I'm sharing this because what we learned was it was not okay to do that. So, so having that open communication is what's really important throughout the whole process.
Daniel, you can
Yes.
go again.
Do what?
You can take over the PowerPoint again.
Okay. So I am at, just to make sure I'm on the same place, we're on the poll, right?
Yes.
Okay, because, hang on, give me 1 second. I have lost my functions on the Zoom. Give me 1 second here, but there's a poll here. And so while I'm trying to figure this out, the poll is, what do you miss the most from your office and your work environment? And so in the chat room, you can do, you've missed the PC with 2 or 3 monitors. I used to work in my office with 3 monitors, and it was amazing to be able to do that, or checking in from coworkers, being able to take a break and lunch, or was it your comfy office chair that you've missed, that I truly miss here at my home as well? Getting dressed for work, your supervisor, your boss, the chisme, the gossip, or you just don't miss anything. Put it into the chat and let's see what y'all come up with.
And along the same lines, yes, I also miss the different conversations that I was having with my coworkers, and the possibility and the ability to be able to just turn around and ask a question. Just Daniel, it's on presentation show, so just wanted to let you know that.
Okay.
But let's see at some of the comments on the chat. What do you miss? What do you miss? Okay, I see here. My extra monitor. Yes, that's one of the things that we've had conversations around in terms of how can we then now add that to our working from home part. Events where I train individuals, so that face-to-face contact and the training space and the interaction. Yes, I hear you, Alejandro. And then checking in with my coworkers, the contact with our patients, and see some of the other responses that we have here. Going to work, the commute. Yes, that's something that, I recently moved to Florida from New York. And it's one of the things that I actually miss the most. But I think now, given our new environment, even in Florida, they're not being able to go places, or in New York, they're not, missing the train. Something that I've heard from my colleagues in New York, staff and clients, checking in support from coworkers, working together and brainstorming. Wow, we have sort of like similar information in terms of being with colleagues, chisme and lunches. That's definitely something. It's nice, and it loses a little bit, kind of like that. That I don't know, je ne sais quoi, when it's like through this medium and this when it's through these long distance mechanisms. So Daniel.
Good, thank you. So hopefully we're back on track with what you're viewing is just the screen there. So
just to make sure that chisme is gossip, so the gossiping, the water cooler conversations. I just want to make that sure.
Right. Thanks for that. So so thinking about all these things that we're missing, or some of us not missing, leads us to thinking about the virtual team dynamics, right? So these are a new reality, meaning how do we interact with our coworkers, as I mentioned at the top of the presentation? How do we replicate that camaraderie through this sort of new virtual environment that we're having to work in, that we're having to recreate in our own workspaces? And so how do we find time and space throughout the day and during these meetings, during these events, between work, to check in with folks, that we might have been able to do, or that we did when we were in side by side in our offices or wherever we worked at. Being able to go in and stop by and say, how's it going? Talk a little bit of, chisme, the little gossip, what's going on, who's doing this, who's doing that. How do we replicate that? How are you replicating that working from home? Remember to use the chat so we can share and learn what other people are doing as well. But doing this is some way, or a way, of how you're able to begin to look at how to cope with this sort of new reality of working from home in this virtual environment that we're working in, right? What's new? What's different for people that you're working with? And then another thing that I thought was unique in some way was taking the opportunity to actually talk to people, talk to your coworkers, whether it's one-to-one or through chat or through text or however you do, just to let them know that, hey, it's okay if you check in on me, if you feel or you notice something different about how I might have reacted, or I'm not reacting or responsive, or maybe you can tell something different in the way that I participated in the meeting today. Let your colleagues, your peers, your friends know, hey, it's okay, to check in on me. I'm not going to get upset. And in fact, I might even appreciate it, or not even realize that, others notice this as well. So allow that to happen so that there's, again, that communication factor, is being aware of each other, even in this virtual world that we're in and that we're working in. And then as we think about the virtual team dynamics, right, something that we've got here, and something that I think is really important of a message that I had recently came across in some of these other sessions that I've handed out, is that through all this, we also have to be a little bit more mindful about presuming a mistake or someone not performing up to par or the way they used to before assuming it was or it is intentional, right? Because as we talked earlier, that we all have competing priorities. So some of us are going to be a little bit more vocal with our colleagues or coworkers about what's going on, why I'm not able to, be so responsive throughout the day, but that I'm getting my work done. And some of us are not going to be so forthright with that. And so we want to, take a few steps back and think about how can we talk, can we bring this up, particularly like supervisors and bosses, how can we bring this up in a way that, presumes that, something else is going on and it's not, just intentional. Of course, unless this person's worked that way before in the regular office space or wherever, so that they're just kind of continuing those behaviors. But generally, try to look at this, and so you see on the screen, when you think you know, assume you don't. Is kind of where we are with this world, because you can't see your coworkers, as I mentioned, face to face, and so we can just pop in on someone, as I mentioned. And see what's going on, as I just mentioned a few minutes ago. And the important part is, again, rethinking that communication and letting people know what's okay, what's not okay, so that we're aware of what boundaries we can gently approach or cross with some people. And then it's okay to use appropriate humor, right? So humor helps, and I could use a lot of humor right now with some of these technical challenges with the Zoom thing. But circumstances happen throughout the day where appropriate use of humor is useful. It's okay to use memes. As you can see, I tried to find some that were sort of on the PC side. What would you say? What would you do here? If you're talking about different things, we use them constantly. It's so funny how, at least I know I use the memes, not constantly, but whenever I just don't have the words to say, I can go on and find something that expresses my thought or opinion or feeling about a comment, or just share something that's funny that kind of goes along with the conversation. And so using humor, again, is a useful tool for everybody. And so again, use it sparingly, use it when you know it's appropriate, but it can go a long way to breaking up the monotony of conversations. Which then brings us to looking at our productivity, right? So I know, the word productivity, as you can see on the screens, we smirk at it, when we hear it or when we see it like we do now. But it's the new reality of what we're dealing with in terms of our own self-management of how we work and navigate working from home. And as if it wasn't hard enough to keep focused or minimize our tendencies to procrastinate in the office, or wherever you're working from, and then let alone with a supervisor or boss, pushing you along or nudging you along to get things done, we now find ourselves having to find ways to manage ourselves. So I've got another poll here, and again in the chat, and we'll look for the chat, your responses in here on the chat, but which of these tools or which of these do you use or have used to help stay on track with your work tasks? So there's the Outlook tasks or Microsoft To Do, Monday.com. For some people might use that, Asana, Wunderlist, Alexa, Siri for some of those that are much more able to do that, or old school, using the old school Excel or plain old pen and paper. And then just for fun, I put in to-do list y que nada. I have it all in my head. Let's see what your responses are in chat.
So we have here like Outlook task, old school, the to-do list on paper and iPhone, I have that, the iPhone one, and on paper I have my honey to-do list, like honey do this, honey do that. Very old school too.
Yeah, we
Um,
got a lot of old school.
pen and paper.
Anything different that people that's not listed that you use? Teams, Microsoft Teams, we use that too. If y'all are like me, I've tried so many different things. I'm kind of one of those, and that's probably where the last answer on this question comes from me is, what to-do list? You can have I have, tablets with to-do list on it. I have my Microsoft Notes with to-do list on it. I have my phone with to-do list on it. And at the end of the day, I still have it in my head what I need to do. I don't know why it just doesn't work for me to use those tools. But so good, because that's what I want to talk about next, right? So our new reality of managing ourselves, right? So we're going to find that staying focused with many other, as I mentioned earlier, competing priorities, will either be a breeze for some of us or a challenge, like it is for me. And it's all going to depend on how each of us are able to manage the situations, the circumstances that we're each dealing with individually. I think that's like a common, thread for this presentation is we are all dealing with this differently. And at the same time, we all have the similar experiences as well. So, staying focused and, being able to manage other things going on throughout your day, things that are going on in your home, with your families, it's all going to fall onto you to find ways to structure your days to work smarter. And some way, somehow within there to also feel productive at the same time. So, think about, what your day will look like and, when will you be able to, or when can you, carve out time to focus on a task or an activity? When can you be your most productive? And that may not always be between 8 and 5 p.m., but there must be, and you can't stress that enough, there must be a time for you to be able to close up shop, close up shop, have a drink, do a virtual, whatever you need to do, but find a way to do that. I was speaking to a friend the other day who's been working from home as well, and she was really excited about all the work that she's been able to get done working from home and getting it done. But then she also acknowledged that she's also found that she's working late into the night, late into the night, and not being able to sleep, not doing other things. And so one thing that I think is an important message is that find those times. You may need to offset some of your day to deal with children or family or roommates or whatever's going on in your space, but make sure you find that time to be able to say, okay, it's time to shut off the laptop, it's time to shut down the Zoom, it's time to do this so that I can have my time, I can let my mind rest. And so that's where some of us, can also be creative in how we use some of the tools that we had talked about in the poll, and to be able to self-manage ourselves with that. Well, did you have anything on time management?
Yes, one of the things that are mentioned is, because of technology, there is this psychological attachment to it. So there's this phrase called psychological detail. So what are the things that we are putting in place to also remove ourselves from the different kind of like distractions, or for example, I'm working more, that happens. I'm more productive. But one of the things is that, when you have, for example, your email or work email and in your phone, we tend to check it, even when we already have clocked out. And this becomes kind of like a behavior that as soon as either we wake up before even clocking in or after we have clocked out, we tend to check these. We tend to check the work email or try to respond, even with Teams as well. It happens that if you don't put anything into I set up a time in Teams and you have it on your phone, it comes as like notifications, right? So you are able to respond or see. So it's giving yourself these kind of like parameters that this is my work time, this is my me time, this is my me and my family or my time. So it's a lot of different organizing to do. So you have here also some of the self-management tools that, you know, I was mentioning on the chat, like we use Monday.com to be able to, you know, organize tasks. And it's a way to also communicate what's being, what's pending, what's in progress, what's being done from a different perspective, and that can be part of supervision. Other time management, I would say more, I go more with like habits to organizing, like you know, begin with an outcome in mind. One of the things that we've put into place for our team is remote. We are from different before the change, but things that we put into place were, for example, to create what's going to be your day schedule, that to do list, but also in terms of tasks. So what's the outcome of that week and what's the outcome of that day? And then you go by putting things first. You know, what are the things that need to be the prioritizing, but not only of work tasks, but that whole psychological attachment, so the detach of it. So at this time, this is gonna be the end that I use my reply email or my text, and the boundaries sometimes, like not texting conventional phone or my personal phone after certain time. You know, this is my work hours have ended. What else? Calendars, I mentioned, are a great tool to be able to also prioritize and see what needs to be done from my end, and ensure support to complete tasks. So this comes the teamwork that may need to be laid out. And I think, Daniel, you're going to talk a little bit about teamwork as well.
Yep. So I also have so the tools that we had mentioned. I also have a couple that I came across, and they're probably tools that we've used, that we do, and probably don't even realize that we're doing them or using them. But I don't know if in the chat room or the chat, you can enter whether you're familiar with these two models, but the one by David Allen for getting things done, and then the other one they're just called the Pomodoro technique. Again, a couple of different models that kind of have been demonstrated to be effective in being able to help with managing time for yourself in self-management. And so I wanted to go ahead and share a video with you guys, and I think if Will can help with that, on the Pomodoro technique, just so you can see. It's very short.
Oh, God. Jesus.
What?
There it goes.
No sound.
was the Pomodoro. Daniel?
And that was Pomodoro. All right, thanks, for that. All right. So something. Hang on just a second. Zoom it's not very friendly when it comes to sharing. Okay, so
Go.
I think yep, got it. All right, so so those are our tools. So just wanted to talk about allowing ourselves to be vulnerable in here, right? So self-management is, not just about, the timing and stuff, but as I mentioned earlier, it's about letting yourself, be a little vulnerable in these situations that we're in, that we find ourselves in today, right? So, these are our new realities that keep, saying of working from home, schools being canceled, nagging pets, concerns with others, concerns with your health or safety, or Zoom working right, or whatever it could be going on, right? And being okay with that, And as I mentioned earlier, when we were talking about rethinking communication, it takes a little bit more for some of us, to open that door and say it's okay for someone to check in on me, or it's okay for me to, share that I'm having a hard time today, or I'm having a difficult time today dealing with things, realizing that things that we maybe didn't need to worry about so much openly in the workplace, now is an opportunity where we might have to do that, especially for some of us that find that we're continuing to have to work from home.
Freaking mask.
For I know, right? For whatever reason that we may have to be working from home, that we continue to work from home. And so we don't have the luxury of saying, to our friends, let's go get a coffee, let's, go have a talk or whatever, so finding ways to deal with that, and still carve out, as we mentioned earlier, that way to sort of replicate what you used to have with your friends at work, and doing it now through virtual, whether you're using Zoom or your text messaging, or finding ways to be creative with TikTok or whatever you need to, to let yourself sort of like relax and take a breath from everything. And so that brings us to our next reality, and that is the reality of our new workspace. So I wanted to be a little vulnerable here, and hopefully you're seeing this, and wanted to take a picture of my own workspace here. So this is my workspace, and actually that's a little bit of a false statement now, because I got a new desk, so I've got a little bit bigger space now, but this is what I have. And so I've had to adapt in my bedroom, my second bedroom, with the space, with this small desk that I have in the picture there, my computer, laptop, reading glasses, coffee mugs everywhere. I tried to make sure it was a PC image to show. But the workspace is going to be different for everybody, right? My workspace is going to work for me, but it may not work for you. And so it's going to look different. These are just images that I found of what it might look like. And, too bad we couldn't get images from you all, but I'm sure you have different things, different ways that you have your office set up at home or wherever you work from. I miss the opportunities to be able to go to a coffee shop and actually work sometime during there, so that way I could just kind of break up the day from being in my second bedroom looking at a wall, and at least being able to feel like there are people around me. And so it'd be interesting to see in chat, how you all have to read how you all have shared that as well. And so your workspace, right? So just some common things. I told you we would kind of share some common things that we've probably heard before, but basically, again, find that dedicated space that's mostly quiet. Find that way to be able to carve that piece out wherever it might be, and set the time up. Sometimes you may need to establish expectations, which I'll share about in just a minute. But as you create your space, think about, what's going to work for you, what's going to be productive and comfortable for you, right? So I think part of that poll that we did a few minutes ago about what do you miss from work, and one of it being, one of them, I think they were all my things that I missed, the chair. Right now I'm sitting in my office chair at home, and I'm about ready to throw it out the window because it's killing my rear end. And so I really miss my office chair that I used to have, but making it comfortable is going to at least help you to be as productive as you can in that space, right? And then, as you can see, mixing it up, right? Where you work, some days you sit, sometimes you stand, sometimes I move to the kitchen, sometimes I bought a little stand that I can put the laptop on, I can go into the living room and have it there on my laps and work from there. So sometimes you kind of have to mix it up. And then something I thought was kind of cool, I haven't really tried it yet, with my coworkers here at LACOA, but thinking about, what would a walking meeting look like? Being able to do something on our smartphone and just walk and talk, as opposed to sitting at the desk, and then planning virtual coffee breaks with your coworkers or with other people, throughout the day to kind of, again, replicate what we might have been doing or used to doing before. And then something else that I thought was also interesting, and I think that we probably do a lot, or maybe not as much as we ought to, and that's to just stretch it out, right? Stretch out, stretch your legs, stretch your arms, stretch your neck, stretch your back. Again, you stand, sit, whatever you need to, again, to be comfortable in your space. And if I were bold enough, I would get up and do stretches in front of y'all, but I'm not that vulnerable today. So, but if anybody else wanted to share their video of them stretching, certainly would entertain that, obviously. But stretching it out, keep going, keep moving, to kind of break up your day. And so then we have another video here, and I think, let me see, Bolo, if I'm able to, are y'all able to see that?
Yes.
Is there sound?
No sound.
No sound. You want to share it from your side then?
Yes, sure. You can. There you go. Let me know if there's sound. Good.
Socioemocional de los
Yeah, there's sound.
esa parte que está quedando bien.
And if I just,
Oh my God, did he fall?
And it's really challenging, I know, with children home from school and working from home. But just trying to just keep all of those distractions out of the...
The whole page comes down.
no, don't touch the computer. I'm talking the whole metal part of the screen.
The monitor itself.
Don't use the mouse.
Okay. Now, wait a minute. It says mute, stop video.
No, I don't want you to do anything on the computer.
Share screen.
I don't want you to do anything on the computer.
In reality, I've heard that social work kind of has very high standards and like good standards of other professions don't have. Yeah.
Hold on.
What's up?
Johnny, I can see you.
We can all see you.
All right. So just something kind of fun to share with you, kind of, again, help bring some humor, as we had kind of talked about earlier, into your workspace. All right, so and then just kind of coming up to just again work expectations or workspace expectations that I had mentioned right before. As you can kind of see from the video, different things that are happening. So these things generally, as you can see, were happening at your home, right? So you had distractions from behind you, from in front of you, from around you. So not only building a space that's obviously comfortable for you and productive, but finding the space where you're able to establish quiet times, one that works with your scheduling, and there were suggestions about maybe hanging signs on your door, but certainly again communicating or finding ways to make sure that children are tended to, your spouse, your roommates, your significant others are aware that you're occupied, busy, and pets. I know one thing for me for pets, 2 dogs, and over the course of these couple of months, what I've had to learn is that I have to let them go out to do their business at least 15 to 30 minutes before a planned meeting or a session like this, because it hadn't failed up to until I learned their pattern, that they felt that because I was home, I needed to tend to them. And so I have had to adapt to those competing priorities of that, adapt with my spouse calling and asking things in the middle of sessions and events and stuff. And so that's all gonna, again, helpful to at least communicate to people, what's going on so that they're aware, because if they're not aware, then, it's an unfortunate event that they might interrupt in a good way. And so then just wrapping it all up, we talked about the, dealing and adapting to the new realities and the priorities that we're all, now dealing with today. Working from home in a different environment, away from our friends, our peers, away from the chisme, the gossip, everything, and finding ways that we can then manage these competing priorities, and then also finding a way to be able to take that time to step away from our desk, our laptop, or whatever it may be, to take care of ourselves as well. I talked about self-management, but there's also a factor of self-care in here as well, so that you have to take care of yourself as well. And I mentioned and talked about communicating and being vulnerable, but you also have to sort of recognize that, and when you need to take that time for yourself, and again, communication, find ways to keep up with the whatever it is that you need to keep you going and supporting you, keep up with the office chisme, the office gossip, what's going on, who's going there, who's what's happening to so and so, etc. So that you can then again create that workspace, where you'll feel comfortable, not too comfortable, but comfortable enough to be productive. And so with that brings us to the end of our presentation. And so this is the opportunity we have for any Q&A, questions and answers that we may have had in the chat. And then depending on how comfortable we are, we might be able to actually open up the lines maybe. Well, what do you think?
Sure. I haven't seen a question yet. I'm just looking at the different comments and kind of like the similarities that we've experienced with the realities of working from home. No questions that I see. So, and we can open the line. So if you want to like raise your hand and ask a question.
Yeah, or comments, or you want to add to the conversation, please, by all means, join in.
I'm not seeing any. So
Yeah. All right.
We are 6 minutes to close, so I think it's to conclude from my end. I will say that it's a trying to figure it out approach. I think it's looking at what works for you and your environment and what you need to do an approach. Teamwork is challenging even when we are in office. So always establishing, I say, ground rules on how you approach a teamwork. It's key because there is, the forming as we come into a team, but there's always going to be a storming. That's part of a team process before you norm the team. So the forming, storming, and norming are the stages of team development. So those are going to happen online. And I was seeing something around the tone. So when it comes to communication, when you don't see other cues, such as the vocal tone or body language that provides more cues to what we're communicating and the tone that is being communicated in, then that's going to be challenging because we might get it. There's noise in between. The technology creates this noise that can break the intention in, I may decode the message in not the way that was intended. So that can create conflict. So also, how do we resolve conflict when it's long distance? Those are other things that we need to be able to have in place as protocols, right? What are the processes to resolve conflict when we are using these 10 mechanisms, and how to continue the work that needs to be done without being in a long distance way. So.
Yep. And this is that dealing with the conflict, when, as I kind of mentioned earlier, kind of flows with that idea, when we get to a point of assuming something about a colleague or coworker who's distant from us, how do we manage that? As opposed to just not dealing with it or letting it continue or fester or to grow out of control, when it was actually something that could have probably been handled through just communicating. So how do you do that? What do you have in place to address those things?
So we do have a question. Peter, how are you?
Hey, Bolo, how are you today?
I'm doing well. Welcome.
Okay. Hi, hello, everybody. I more than a question, it's maybe see how are we preparing to let me see how I put this. So we have been to go into getting used to be working from home, and sometimes in a very cómodo and in a very easy way. If anybody is preparing to the time that when we have to then start going back to work at the offices, and what process have they done, if any, in their programs or organizations to do so?
Okay, thank you for the question. So I think that the reintegration to the work, physical work, right?
Yes.
I think that that's what's happening right now in terms of capacity building. It's some of the processes that we're seeing, because it's everyone is saying it's a new normal, right? So in the future is going to be, or not the future. And soon it's the possibilities of, for example, providing services would be more of an option if I wanted to do it everything online, or if I want to do a hybrid of going face to face and online, or if I just want to do the usual face to face. So when it comes to returning home, we at least are thinking about also the same way that the different cities or locations are doing it in stages, and looking at what are the essential things that need to be in place to be able to address the needs of our staff in terms of their safety, but also look at the needs of our community and clients that come in and look for services. So we're, and kind of like looking at some models that are out there in terms of, maybe shifts could be a component of it. And I think others, for example, Daniel, I think you're going to do maybe a TA request soon at an organization that is full already 100% working at their location, but it's because they have I think a space that facilitates, but we have to look into what we put in place as trainers for us to be able to engage. I also be providing safety for us and the participants as well. So I don't know if Daniel, you want to comment on that, and if anybody want to comment on Peter's question, which is a great question on the chat.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that was it. I mean, I think it's just also being very aware, of how we're able to return back to work, and safely. And I think, I mean, I kind of read into another thing. It was like going back to work after being at home in my pajamas or in my whatever I'm wearing or whatever, and now having to get back into a mindset of having to go back to an office setting or to a work setting or whatever it might be, can be another shock to anyone's system as well. So we may be doing presentations in the next few months about how to do that, right? How to get out of the mindset of doing everything you needed to do to set up your space, only now to have to like start getting dressed in the morning and going to work and packing your lunch and whatnot. Good, thank you.
I think we are at 1 minute past the time and there's a closing happening. So this recording will be shared. The PowerPoint presentation will be shared. We thank you so much for being today with us. And, we can potentially have another of these conversations with kind of like protocols and what you said, Peter, like how do we then go back, right? And now that we know that, that what we do in our offices can be done also long distance. So it's kind of like managing now this work from home, telework, and again, how we provide also services that are hybrid or are online or are face-to-face. So thank you so much. Thank you, Danielle. Thank you, everyone. And we'll see you. Bye.